Welcome to something special. Welcome to TEDx. This TEDx event is part of a global conversation that takes place every day in every corner of the world. In schools, in theaters, in workplaces, even in prisons, people gather to hear the best ideas bubbling up in their communities. More than 3,000 TEDx events are held every year in 170 countries. It's a remarkable thing. TEDx events are self-organized under a license from TED, a non-profit organization devoted to discovering and sharing powerful ideas in the form of TED Talks. It's not TED itself, but your local TEDx team of volunteers that has done all the work to put on today's event, including booking all of the speakers. It's this team's ideas, dedication, and time that have made this possible. We really hope today's program sparks an exciting conversation. This is a day for curiosity and for skepticism, for inspiration and for action. The more you enter into it, the more you will take out. And now, on with the show.
Good evening. My name is Jada Johnson, and I am a senior at Brooklyn Laboratory Charter High School. I am thrilled to be your host for Brooklyn Lab's first ever TEDxYouth at BrooklynLab event. Youth voice matters. A little youth voice here and a little youth voice there is not going to solve systematic errors or prejudice that exists within our institutions, systems, and structures, nor will it solve the problem societal pressures present for those who are involved in those systems. This event challenges that notion and puts the spotlight on youth change agents who call on us to listen carefully, act decisively, and think differently. This has been a challenging time for our communities, both here in Brooklyn and nationally. It's in these challenging and difficult times that we can choose a new direction, change the status quo, and imagine a new path. Tonight, you'll hear from change agents throughout New York City and beyond, many of whom attend Brooklyn Lab, focused on three key themes: unique approaches to unique challenges, growth mindsets, and teamwork for a collective good. Our ideas are worth sharing. Tonight, focus on achieving racial equality in America, gaining insight into Gen Z's tools for social change, and unique approaches to reduce the impact of climate change. It is now my honor and privilege to introduce our first speaker. We often hear the term growth mindset. It's become a way to describe challenging the notion that learning is fixed or static. Words like grit and resilience are often used to describe the ability to meet a moment of challenge with the ability to expand learning and understanding. Yasmin Chowdhury, our first high school student speaker, has found a recipe for developing and cultivating a growth mindset, even in the most ordinary everyday experiences, like cooking. Yasmin not only shares with us her cooking tips for everyday life, but how opportunities to build tenacity, character, and that growth mindset can be found throughout our everyday journey, even in the kitchen.
I love chicken wings and all things chicken. If I had to choose one food to eat, if I was stuck in a jungle, it would probably be chicken wings. One day I woke up with a normal teenage craving, and this craving could only be fulfilled with some nice, tender, spicy wings. Suddenly, I was in my kitchen where all the bowls are. I grabbed one, and I cleaned and washed my chicken, as always, and I opened the cabinet, and there were so many spices, like paprika, sazon, chili powder, adobo, turmeric, garlic powder, onion powder, and yeah, there are a lot of powders. And then I used sauces like barbecue sauce, buffalo sauce, and hot sauce, and I used a lot of different sauces too. After everything I added was mixed, I could smell the marination. It was so spicy and flavorful, my mouth started watering, and even my nose. After all the powders and sauces, I set the wings to marinate in the oven. This was my ultimate wings story and recipe. The wings making story is my beginning to the journey of maturing and learning a new concept of growth mindset. My quarantine schedule has been awesome, so I've been starting to cook the most amazing dishes at 2 a.m. My wings were done marinating and I was really hungry, so I first placed the wings in the oil to fry them. After that, I mixed the barbecue sauce with the hot sauce and drizzled them over the wings. I added some parsley on top, and after the wings were finished, I invited my family to enjoy these wings. I was so excited I didn't even try them at first. My mom took one bite of the wings and went to drink some water. She told me she didn't like them and they didn't taste good. My immediate reaction was anger. I was so angry. I put so much effort into creating these, and I said to myself, she's wrong. I did these right. Her taste buds are messed up and she doesn't really like anything. So I ran to my room and I started to cry. After I cooled down and realized I hadn't actually tried the wings, I went back to the kitchen. I took one bite into the wings and I felt all the powders literally stain my teeth. It was horrible. My mom came to the kitchen and started laughing. We were both laughing because the wings were actually really bad. My mom sat down with me and she told me the same thing happened to her many times before she perfected her wings recipe. She helped me realize that not everything is perfect, and I looked up some recipes which I probably should have done in the beginning. Typically, the first human instinct after making a mistake is to be angry and blame others or something else. My anger began with me crying and slamming doors. After I realized that all that crying and door slamming is not good for myself or the door. Instead, I took a lesson from my anger and I used my failure to help me grow and learn new lessons from mistakes. To create a growth mindset, you have to stop asking yourself, how or why did this happen to me? Instead, ask yourself, what can I learn from this? How can I make this better in the future? How can I prevent others from making the same mistake? Learning from failure is a part of growth mindset. Growth mindset means to believe your intelligence can be developed through experiences. My failure to create good wings was a perfect lesson for me to embrace and persist in the face of setbacks. Accepting what you did wrong and being open about it. So next time you create a disastrous dish or fail a test, let others know. You could say something like, I didn't do this correctly. Do you have any advice or tips on how to do better next time? In my case, I asked my personal professional chefs, otherwise known as my grandma, mom, and Auntie Fatima, because they have experience overcoming their own mistakes. To improve my recipe, I created the Ultimate Wings 2.0. This is a recipe I made sure to write down. The first thing I did was clean up my chicken, and I placed it in the bowl, and I used more spices like garlic powder, oregano, Goya sazon, and tandoori spices. Now, I based the amount of spices I put on the amount of wings I had. In this case, I made about 15 wings, so I used about 2 tablespoons of each spice. This was a measurement I hadn't done in my previous recipe. I took out almost all the sauces, such as buffalo and barbecue, because these sauces tend to overwhelm and they're not the right proportion, and they weren't correctly proportioned. I used one, and I only used hot sauce because my mom suggested it would complement the spices better, because it's spicy and not tangy like barbecue or buffalo sauce. Here, the lesson I learned from making the wings a second time is that the spices are not meant to be drenched in food, and spices and sauces are meant to be measured based on the quantity and content of the food. So the right taste for some wings is a good amount of salt and a spicy hot sauce to give it a kick. There is wisdom in family, and I learned that knowledge runs deep through family brains. And if you ask, you could get that generational knowledge. It sounds pretty boring, but once you realize that the power of family can help you create ultimate dishes and give you new perspectives for daily activities, you could set your mind to do anything. My family taught me to accept challenges and look towards the future. When something bad happens, sit down and tell yourself that maybe this was meant for you in order for you to learn and grow from this challenge. This is how you enact a growth mindset. I want to grow and learn to change and make an impact on the world. I believe that with COVID-19, although it's an unfortunately horrible time, it has its positive aspects. The positive aspects of this time give us a unique opportunity to grow. Today's world will only be challenging if we don't learn to grow. Our ignorance and acceptance to change will hinder our growth for the rest of the world. We won't be able to impact the world positively if we don't start building growth mindsets today. Current issues like immigration, disease outbreaks, race and ethnic inequality, these issues can only be solved if we learn from past mistakes and think about how these issues will impact the future. So as the youth of today, let's start by creating some disastrous dishes, fail a test. Let's learn from our daily actions and build on to saving the world. Having a growth mindset is the greatest advantage today's youth will have. Start by making a dish for your family, catching their opinions on it. Write down the tips and advice they give you, and my best advice is to search some recipes. Today's tip to grow is to research and ask others before creating your ultimate dish. Nothing is ever perfect the first time.
Hi, my name is Talia Milgram-Elcott. I'm the founder and executive director of 100K in 10, a national network on track to prepare 100,000 excellent science, technology, engineering, and math teachers by 2021. A construction toy or a doll? Pink or blue? Did you know that blue was originally the color for girls? It's true. Blue was seen as dainty, so girls wore more of it, while pink was the stronger color, reserved for boys. It didn't change until the 1950s, when some big advertising campaigns pushed pink as a feminine color just for girls. Why are we judging anyway? And how do we evolve if we impose these old school frameworks on today's modern times? Take #BoysDanceToo. When Prince George was bullied online for practicing ballet, that hashtag became a teaching moment about stereotypes and inclusion. Next thing you know, 300 dancers, many of them male, descended on the center of Times Square and led a massive dance class. Boys can dance as much as girls can play soccer. 11th grader Courtney Lucius is showing us the way. Courtney shares how Generation Z is not buying into 1950s advertising or the idea that gender is destiny. She and Gen Z are rejecting easy binaries, even as they've brought a variety of gender expressions into the mainstream. Courtney shows us how Gen Z is using technology to change the narrative on gender expression and calls on us to reject the pink versus blue divide.
Everyone's gay now. It's just the phase. Everything's so fluid now. They're just used to be gay and straight. It starts at birth. Pink is for a girl and blue is for a boy. Even before you're born, gender places expectations on you. Expecting a woman to be warm, sexy, and feminine, and expecting a man to be unfeeling, strong, and decisive. It's said that getting older provides more opportunities for self-expression. However, these opportunities were pioneered by many people within my age range. As you see an increase in young people getting comfortable exploring their gender identities as form of self-expression, there's an increase in confusion from other generations. Despite these ideas not being new, challenging gender expression has become more socially acceptable. Additionally, by challenging norms of gender expression, Generation Z has managed to grow past outdated ideas surrounding gender expression and gender roles. Today, I'm going to describe the changing culture surrounding gender expression in today's youth. Before we go forward, we must take a step back. We can all acknowledge the long-lasting existence of those who look to bend society's rules, such as William Dorsey Swann as the first drag queen and Madam C.J. Walker as a strong female entrepreneur. However, there was extreme bias and misconception surrounding those who attempted to break against societal norms. These ideas keep progressing through the years, such as a man and woman's role inside and outside of the house, with women being expected to be proficient in household activities and men being expected to bear the brunt of a financial burden. As generations progress through Boomers, Generation X, and now Generation Z, you see individuals becoming more comfortable with challenging the way gender should be expressed. It's important to understand the concept we're talking about today. Gender expression and sexuality are two different concepts, yet they constantly get confused. Gender expression is a reflection of one's internal perception of their gender. There's a common misconception that one's gender expression is indicative of their sexuality. After acknowledging the rigid gender expectations of the past, it's important to see how they've morphed to fit a more progressive youth. Through the emergence of social media, people are allowed to use the different platforms to express themselves, normalizing different kinds of gender expression. Instagram provides platform for thousands of individuals to blend in among millions of other individuals like them. Seeing male dancers on Instagram has removed some of the stigma surrounding male dancers and stopped many people from assuming their sexuality based off the activity they choose to participate in. Additionally, with the rise in popularity of beauty gurus and makeup culture, there has been a shift in the culture of makeup. Makeup brands have rebranded to become more inclusive as a result of increased gender expression from the younger generations on social media. Through social media, you see an increase in teenagers who found a safe space to express themselves. Social media allows for you to control who views your content and how your content is presented. However, when discussing social media, it's necessary to discuss the negatives. It's impossible to ignore the overwhelming amount of anxiety and sadness that the constant scrutiny of social media can bring about. When you put yourself out there on social media, you're leaving yourself vulnerable to plenty of negative judgment. However, social media allows for you to control your content and who is allowed to view your content. In addition to that, social media is comprised of thousands of little communities for everyone to feel comfortable and find their place. Once someone is able to find their place on social media, they can feel comfortable expressing themselves with minimal judgment. In addition to social media, pop culture and its inhabitants have adapted to the different acceptable times. Within mainstream social media, you see people pushing against the gender roles assigned to them by traditional society. With male stars like A$AP Rocky painting his nails, or Young Thug wearing dresses intended for female models, they're pushing barriers and opening up opportunities for a lot of younger people to take direction on their own. These rappers help alleviate some of the negative conversations around self-expression with young men. The influences allow young men to feel more comfortable with gender expression, such as exploring nail polish and alternative ways of dressing. Additionally, with the help of women like Janelle Monáe and Billie Eilish, there's an influx of young women using their influence to feel more comfortable with exploring the way they convey themselves to the world, such as exploring masculine ways of dressing and straying away from feminine beauty expectations. However, experimenting with gender identity does not come without any consequences. Growing up, my friend Kylie hated her hair for reasons I never understood. At 6 years old, it was long, brown, and gorgeous. For the next 4 years of our life, she spent months trying to convince her parents to let her cut it shorter. Despite what her parents wanted, she just wasn't as comfortable with long hair. It didn't reflect who she was and who she wanted to be seen as. Finally, around the age of 10, her parents let her cut it to her shoulders. As children, her parents thought she was too young to make decisions about the way she wanted to be perceived, leaving her to feel uncomfortable in the body they had gifted her with. Soon, years went on and Kylie continued to leave her hair short. However, Kylie realized she hated the dresses she was forced to wear to our school concerts. Kylie went to war with her parents for the right to wear khakis in school as long as she could. However, once we reached middle school, we weren't allowed to wear khakis anymore. At this point, Kylie was suffocating under the pressure from her parents and now our school. Kylie threw herself into sports in order to find a community where she could dress comfortably. Finally, at the age of 13, Kylie left the school I attended and began to settle into her own. She cut her hair to her ears and exclusively wore baggy sweatpants and baggy shirts. After my experiences with Kylie, I saw how hard she fought to effectively convey how she wanted to look. The unwillingness of her parents to listen to their child encouraged distrust between Kylie and her parents. Kylie had a full understanding of how she wanted to convey her gender expression from a young age. Now, I know what you're thinking. No one knows who they are at 6. However, gender places barriers on you before you're born, not leaving room for experimentation. The impact your gender has is inescapable. It places stereotypes on you before birth. In addition, gender expression and your awareness of it starts at a young age. The inclination to experiment with your gender is natural, and this generation has only normalized it. Social media allows the younger generation to express and explore their gender identity, no matter what obstacles are presented to them in their immediate lives. The yearning to express yourself surpasses any obstacles presented. By utilizing the internet, this current generation has many outlets for self-expression. Instagram, Snapchat, and Twitter have been utilized by the current generation to display their personal gender expression to anyone who will listen. Recently, I've become friends with a 17-year-old named Sebastian. He's a typical teenage boy playing sports and video games. However, he's begun to get more curious about how nail polish would look on him. The last time we hung out, he asked me to paint his nails a pretty blue color so he could see how it looks. Although I didn't think much of it, something so small made his eyes light up. Once his nails were painted, he asked me to take the polish off before his mom saw. Despite the explosion of gender expression within the last 20 years, there's still a disconnect between the younger generation and the older generation when discussing gender expression. Older generations tend to have a very rigid view of gender, leaving very little room for experimentation, whereas younger generations possess a broader sense of freedom when addressing gender expression. Because of this disconnect, there's a huge level of confusion older generations have when addressing younger generations. Gender expression is so important to every individual. Gender expression is one of the many facets of self-expression. Despite the barriers placed around gender expression in the past, gender expression has been allowed to thrive within our advancing society. With social media platforms and influencers in the media, gender expression is not only accepted, but encouraged. We've seen Generation Z really push the boundaries on what is socially acceptable in order to make comfortable spaces for everyone. Now, I am well aware, along with thousands of other teens, that there are people in all age ranges who disagree with the majority. People who believe that giving children too much power for themselves could only cause more confusion. However, without the ability to explore for yourself at a young age, there will only be more confusion at an adult age. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tyra Mariani, president of the Schultz Family Foundation. We're taking a quick break from TEDx Youth Talks to hear from Janae Kelly, a super talented spoken word artist who's a freshman at Rhodes College in Tennessee. Her piece, entitled Funeral, sets the tone for an upcoming talk focused on racial justice. Enjoy.
When the black and whites of the police car cruises down the street, the posture of every single black child was straightened, looking more like human cutouts for shooting ranges than we ever did before, but we still show them the white palms of our hands, thinking maybe it will remind the shooter that we are just like them. The only privilege of my black skin is knowing that my neighborhood will soon become a morgue, because America to me has been a coffin, a deathbed already prepared, the all too often sound of lullabies being sung at funerals, of funerals occurring all too often, but who will step in and say it is enough? Say, America, do you see how you have integrated PTSD into a culture? How do you stomach this ulcer when you have killed all your black brothers and sisters? How do you plan to erase all the black ink from your white history books? How do you plan to take all the decaying teddy bears off the children's light pole?
Hello, I'm Tokunbo Shobowale, Executive Vice President for Business and Operations at the New School, a progressive university in New York City. I am also a board member of the Brooklyn Laboratory Charter School. Being black in America can be dangerous to your health. In Baltimore and other segregated cities, the life expectancy gap between African Americans and whites is as much as 20 years. No year has better demonstrated the deep racial divide in our communities than 2020. A year marked by the COVID-19 pandemic, where black Americans are 3.2 times more likely to die from COVID than whites. America has yet had to become a racial reckoning as we end the decade with over 6,000 people killed by police. The rate of fatal police shootings among black Americans was much higher than that for any other ethnicity, standing at 32 fatal shootings per million of the population as of September 2020. The murders of countless innocent black lives has forced Americans to confront our racist past and present. High school senior Amir argues that before we are able to take collective action against America's systemic racism, we must first create economic equality for foundational black Americans by providing reparations.
The United States owed reparations to descendants of American slaves. The wealth of America was and is based on the economic exploitation of the descendants of American slaves. Black people on the street now because of police violence, white supremacist terrorism, and institutional racism are all in place as a means to ensure prosperity for white people and the subjugation of black people. The poverty that we face was systematically engineered and was not accidental. Thus, we, the descendants of American slaves, also known as foundational black Americans, require reparations across the board to correct these evils. In my speech, I'm going to talk about why foundational black Americans deserve reparations, who qualify, what reparation is defined as, and the black agenda. Here's a brief history of why foundational black Americans deserve reparations. Foundational black Americans are the descendants of the black people who survived one of the greatest atrocities in recorded history, American slavery. Foundational black Americans are the descendants of the black people who built the United States from scratch. But contrary to popular belief, this history did not start in 1619. The history of foundational black Americans started almost 100 years earlier. The first documented foreign settlers in the New World of North America were enslaved black people who were brought over by Spanish colonizer Lucas Van de Ayllon in 1526. Shortly after, Ayllon and the 600 other Spaniards arrived to the area which will later become South Carolina Georgia coast, the enslaved black captors launched a successful revolt, forcing the few remaining Spanish enslavers to ultimately flee from the area back towards the Caribbean. The liberated black people amalgamated into the local Native American society, and this will become a new historic chapter in which will ultimately become the culture of foundational black Americans. Since 1526, the culture of foundational black Americans have been that of building, resisting, persevering, and fighting for justice. The descendants of American slaves, also known as foundational black Americans, are the only ones who are eligible for reparations. A foundational black American is any person classified as black who can trace their blood lineage back to the system of American slavery. To be designated as a foundational black American, at least one parent must come from a non-immigrant background in the United States of America. Sources like the 1870 census and the 1900 census are both good verification resources to see if someone is a descendant of American slave. That was just a brief history lesson. Now back to the topic of reparations. Reparation is defined as a $20 trillion check to the descendants of American slave. While only the descendants of American slaves are eligible for reparations, steps to dismantle systematic white supremacy and stop white supremacist violence is a right of all melanated people of Aboriginal African descent. Reparations are not just financial. We require educational reparations to correct the crimes American schools have committed against black children. We require judicial reparations for past crimes such as the killing of Emmett Till and Trayvon Martin, who killers were allowed to walk free with impunity, as well as the ongoing crime of the white supremacist court system to continue de facto chattel slavery, which is a hallmark of the prison industrial complex. We require political reparations to address how a majority black area can be ruled over by confirmed white supremacist politicians. And with that, I go into my first point. The agenda must address black people and only black people. Any discussion of addressing black people needs must focus solely on black people. While it may seem obvious, the problem is the government and the media have embarked on a campaign to detour all efforts to focus on black people by diverting attention away from black people and putting it on trick words like people of color and minority, which they have twisted so much that minority can include white people, women, gays, white identifying Latinx people, and others. This strategy to deny black people resources, affirmative action is a perfect example of this. My second point, black society's top priority is economic empowerment. Virtually all of black Americans' ills can be traced directly back to a lack of economic resources, from education to healthcare to housing. The lack of money is the prime factor behind those issues. America has waged a never-ending war to prevent black people from having economic resources for the exploitative benefits of the rest of society. There needs to be a Marshall Plan for the descendants of American slaves, patterned after the Marshall Plan that was initiated in Japan after World War II. Public and private entities must all be incentivized to participate, as well as practically all of American public and private entities have benefited from keeping black people economically oppressed. 20% of public and private contracts should be reserved for black businesses. For several centuries, America has done business strictly along ethnic lines. It has embarked on a campaign of bombing black business districts like the very Black Wall Street, as well as using racial regulations to target black businesses today for destruction. All of this is done to protect white businesses and preserve white economic privilege. To correct this, the public and private sector that have all profit off of economically disenfranchised black citizens should repay the debt by instituting a mandatory minimum 20% contract requirement with businesses that are black sole proprietorship or corporations that are 75% black owned. City contracts, municipal bonds, equity stakes in these private companies, tax credit or exemption from tax owed, land grants and set-asides, 0% financing, as well as direct cash disbursements are all suitable methods of addressing these debts. The United States government was able to instantly allocate $10 trillion to deal with the COVID-19 outbreak of 2020. It didn't require a study, a commission, or a vote from the general population. It was done because it was deemed necessary. It is an insult to tell black people that all of a sudden all types of examination and delays are needed before we can be given what a virus was given without a thought. The United States owe a great debt to my people, a debt that must be and will be paid in full. The United States have committed an unforgivable genocide against my people. Reparation is the first of many steps to correct these wrongs. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Bill Crummy, Managing Director of Blue Ridge Labs at the Robin Hood Foundation. Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, Eric Garner, Philando Castile, Sandra Bland, Corey Jones, and so many more. Black Americans are 2.5 times as likely as white Americans to be killed by the police. Systemic racism and racial injustice is a matter of life and death for millions of Americans. Tonight, we hear from Anquan Bolden, former NFL player and founder of the Players Coalition, on how his own family's experience with police violence and racial injustice have become a clarion call for change. Anquan shares how some things, advocating for social change in this country, are bigger than just football.
Yeah, I'll never forget that night. I was still playing with the 49ers, and my wife walks up after the game and told me that my cousin Corey had been killed. Corey broke down on the side of the road, and a plainclothes police officer pulled up. Then this guy starts screaming. All you hear from there is 3 shots.
Why is my son gone today? Why?
He would give you his shirt. He would be cold just to keep you warm.
This officer was in plain clothes. Corey had no way of knowing who he was.
There's just some things that are bigger than football. And I felt like starting the Players Coalition and affecting change in this country was one of those things. We focused on police-community relations, education and economic advancement, and criminal justice reform. Had it not been for the work that we do, Corey's death would have been in vain. The best way to inspire change is to be it.
Hi, I'm Larry Berger, the CEO of Amplify, an education company just down the road in Dumbo, Brooklyn. Every year, so many of us make the New Year's resolution to live a healthier, more active life. But it's hard to find the motivation to make that change. How do you stay inspired beyond that first week of January? Mark Tettis, our next high school speaker, found his inspiration for living a healthier lifestyle in a particular kind of cartoon. Mark shares how anime, the Japanese cartoon genre that is populated by fiercely determined heroes, became his inspiration for healthy living. The heroes in anime aren't born with special powers, they aren't bit by a radioactive spider, they just work really hard to become as strong and determined as they are. Mark's talk encourages you to open your mind to unexpected sources of inspiration found in your everyday life.
Have you ever been inspired by an unexpected source? Whether it's by a friend, a parent, or a family, or a superhero, you probably said yes. Now think back to that time where that person or inspired you to do something, and if so, then how did it felt? I always ask myself that question whenever I'm going through some tough times in life, and it always keeps myself going. And this is exactly one of the things that helped me get over the toughest things I've ever faced in my life, which was accepting who I am. As I was inspired by an unexpected source, in this case, it was anime. And as I explained to you how I use these Japanese cartoons to overcome how I feel about my body, and I hope that through my stories, I can help you get through similar situations as well. Growing up, I wasn't always the athletic child. I'm sure not for most people watching. I was pretty chubby, and my name was very closely related to something related to a woman's chest, partially because of my last name and partially because I had flabs on my chest. But the teasing really did hurt me a lot. It was like a crippling axe swinging at my legs. I was getting winded by how much I was getting criticized. And my confidence was as thin as paper, especially because it's in elementary school, so you can imagine how I felt when these kids would make fun of me for being chubby or overweight. I had thought for most of my life leading up to that point that I was doomed to be chubby or I was doomed to just stay this way. I had that same mindset for a very long time until I discovered anime. Not just any anime, it was One Punch Man to be exact. And in that anime, the main character has the ability of punching through any villain in a single punch. And he also states to the characters of how he got this powerful, because obviously everyone's curious, and he says that he does 100 push-ups, 100 sit-ups, 100 squats, and a 10-kilometer run, which is about 6 miles. And although the reaction of the rest of the characters in the anime was surprised because it didn't seem like it was much, it had inspired me and given that light of flames to just do it. And the very next day, I woke up with that same intention in mind to just have that drive and go do the same exact thing. And then right after that, I felt very exhausted. I woke up feeling dreadful because everything hurts, and that was the first time I ever worked out. But I had lit that flame and give me inspiration that just maybe if I would continue this, I could punch through my villains. Metaphorically speaking, obviously, because I'm not One Punch Man, but I could finally become fit, and I could finally become not chubby. This also led me to get into more anime, like Dragon Ball Z, like Naruto, and many others, in which characters, like Saitama, or One Punch Man, were to work out and get stronger. The lesson I surprisingly learned from this is that even in tough situations where I seemed like I was stuck, I managed to pull through. And it helped me get through many situations that apply to me in real life, and I'll explain to you later on throughout the rest of this speech. But it also taught me a lot about body image because, like I said, as growing up, I was chubby and made fun of, and this anime had given me a hope. It also realized, as working out even more, that I shouldn't expect the bodies that I see on internet. This was a big reason why I felt like I was hopeless, because looking at people like Chris Evans, or Chris Hemsworth, or The Rock, looking at how big they are and muscular and vascular, and always wanted me to be fit, and that is good for inspiration. If you look up to those people, kudos to you. You were inspired by them. I'm not taking that away. But you shouldn't expect to be the same exact body type or same exact sculpt as they are. They're doing something completely different than what you are, and you're doing something completely different. You guys are two different people, and it helped me realize that a lot, and that I should just focus on who I am. In another anime, Dragon Ball Z, the main character, Vegeta, was talking to Goku, or talking to Goku while fighting a really powerful opponent for the sacred universe, something over exaggerated, Dragon Ball Z. But while saying it to Goku, he was powering up, and the words that he said was, "I'll surpass my own limits in my own way." And I think what really inspired me was partially the quote, but I think the context building up to that quote. Throughout all of Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z and Dragon Ball Z Super, Vegeta has always kind of in a way been like the shadow of Goku, and it's like a cat and mouse when it comes to getting power. Every single time Goku would achieve a new limit, Vegeta would just go and achieve that same limit. If Goku would achieve Super Saiyan, Vegeta would get Super Saiyan. Goku wants Super Saiyan 2, he'll go Super Saiyan 2. And that whole idea of this power level of chasing was just something known throughout the whole anime. But when I heard Vegeta say that he'll surpass his own limits in his own way, it was as though that he didn't want to follow the line or follow the shadow that Goku was in, where there's this constant power cat and mouse chase. He wanted to become his own power. He wanted to be his own. He wanted to find his own strengths without copying someone else, and that really spoke out to me because, like I said before, when it came to looking at your celebrity idols, you shouldn't really focus your attention on being like them. It's good to be inspired by them, but you shouldn't try to be like them. You're your own person, and you should grow knowing your limits, and you should grow knowing who you are as a person rather than someone else. This spoke to me a lot because I didn't really, at that point, I was really confused, obviously, about who I wanted to become when I get older, but I always know that I'll always be myself, and that I should always focus on my own journey, and that I should always try to grow and become my own self, better myself, not for just anyone else, but for me and only me. The last and final anime I'll leave you all with that really inspired me was a very popular one, a very, very popular one, and it's pretty recent. It's an anime called My Academia. And in this anime full of superheroes and supervillains, this young boy, Deku, with no superpowers, was told by his idol, All Might, that he would never become a hero. And this had broken Deku. But later on in that episode, we see that same boy who was told that he'd never become a hero, Deku, risk his life to save his friend from being consumed by this villain. And it inspired All Might to go and save his life, even though All Might was at that point powerless and didn't want to do anything. And then towards the end of the episode, that All Might would tell Deku that you too can become a hero. And I think when I heard that, I even were watching it, like, while writing this speech, I started to just tear up a lot because it was that quote really spoke to me. Deku wasn't always a confident character. He still isn't in the anime. He's a very shy person, and watching him fight for his life or risk his life and have that courage really inspired me and spoke out to me. It was as though, as someone who was made fun of, like Deku, for having no powers, that I could take control of my own destiny and I could become stronger than who I was. And on top of all of that, they also sort of montage. And I love montages in all animes, especially when it comes to working out, because it always wants me to do it to the point that I would literally stop watching the montage and start working out and then continue watching it. But it's always spoken out to me. And I tend to just really love those type of moments. Anime had taught me to deal with a lot of tough situations, and I know people may say it's for nerds, but who really cares? I love it. And if for those of you who don't know what anime is or never really got the time to, enjoy it, I suggest go watch an anime or pick up a manga and read it. You'll probably enjoy your time, trust me. And for those of you who've already been watching anime and probably watched a lot, maybe if you haven't already looked at an anime character or this anime as rather than just a bunch of people and cartoons being drawn, think of it as people with ideas, with beliefs, motives, and goals. And maybe you can see how their life and what their decisions make can help you inspire things. I mean, it helped me, and I'm sure it can help you.
Hi, my name is Sonia Park. I am the Executive Director of the Diverse Charter Schools Coalition. The Social Dilemma, one of the most watched docudramas of 2020, has people committing to deleting their social media as they watch what has been described as the single most lucid, succinct, and profoundly terrifying analysis of social media ever created. It spurred countless articles about how the rise of social media has caused a precipitous uptake in the rates of anxiety and depression for young people. 11th grader Jadelle Brown challenges this assumption, arguing that social media platforms such as TikTok and other entertainment sources such as music and dance provide a critical outlet for teenagers struggling with mental health issues.
Hello, my name is Jadelle Brown, an 11th grader at BrooklynLab Charter School, and I will be talking about the unique approaches teenagers use to cope with mental health. Generation Z is known for being creative and socially progressive. Generation Z is also known for doing really stupid things, like biting Tide Pods for fun, or coming up with weird phrases like, "It's okay, boomer," or "This is not it." But we are also outspoken, knowledgeable, and we know when to speak out for injustice. It is also well known that Gen Z has significantly higher rates of depression and mental illness. The music, art, and the dance on social media are effective ways teenagers use to cope with their mental health struggles. Now, when thinking about beauty, everyone has their own preferences and types of what they consider to be beautiful. But to what extent can we criticize others for not fitting those standards? Society today creates an illusion that sets standards on what a person should look like to be considered beautiful or how they should act, and certain expectations they should live up to, and the amount of education they need to make something of themselves. Adults also play a part in teenage mental health because a lot of parents stress teens out and often criticize them, whether they mean to or not. No matter how much of a strong facade we put on, teenagers are still kids and words still reach deep. My generation feels these pressures acutely, and they worsen or can even cause mental health problems in teens. Social pressure can impact how a person feels about themselves and can make them question their worth. Judgment can also lead to social anxiety, seeing as the fear of being stared at or being criticized can mess up someone's confidence and mindset. Everyone is different, and if we can't see that, there's definitely something wrong with the way we perceive things. Teenagers face a lot of pressure from beauty standards and often listen to music to ease their mind or find a path to loving themselves. One way my generation has learned to cope with this social pressure is with music, and specifically by listening to the affirming and loving music of BTS, the Korean pop group known internationally. BTS is one of those musical coping mechanisms, as people often listen to their music to find love and gain motivation to keep going when faced with hardships. One of BTS albums, Love Yourself, Answer, talks a lot about accepting yourself and all your flaws and finding a way through that feeling of never-ending darkness. All of their albums send listeners a deeper message that normally focus on finding one's true self or facing their insecurities and anxieties head-on. BTS doesn't just make music. They create songs that connect to their fans and tell a story. Despite the language barrier, BTS and their fans have a really strong connection. As quoted from their amazing leader, Kim Namjoon, no one is born ugly. We're just born in a judgmental society. Second, teenagers are stressed from the tons of schoolwork being given in online school. I've been there. Due to the safety measures that have been implemented, students had to switch to online school. And school itself was already hard before, so imagine remote learning. Now students have to sit hours and hours on Zoom calls every day, which creates a depressing mood because no one wants to sit at home learning. Remote learning can make people lose the motivation and energy to keep up. And over time, the stress will get to them, and school will be nothing but a depressing force of habit. Teens have made remarks saying how school doesn't even feel like learning anymore. It's just doing assignments and getting a grade. This kind of environment can create a negative mindset on mental health, especially for teenagers, as now is the time we're now trying to find ourselves and developing as a person. Often, teenagers use TikTok as a way to distract themselves from schoolwork. Social media has good aspects that allow teenagers to connect with each other and help. TikTok is a really good way for teenagers to share creative ideas like artwork, which can ease the mind. Art has been known to help with anxiety. It's a great way to relieve emotions and express feelings. And social media is a crucial outlet that lets teens share their artwork with each other. Therapy can come in many different forms, as everyone has a different way of dealing with mental illness, and one of those is art, which is a very effective way. Throughout TikTok, I have seen many teenagers expressing themselves through art as a way to express their opinions and belief. I once saw a girl draw on her wall. I'm not that creative, but it did look nice. 2020 has been a year full of tragedy. COVID-19 being one of those major issues. When lockdown first started, many teens were excited to get away from school, myself included. But as time went on, it started to get really boring, and people started facing more struggles with anxiety and depression. As everyone was stuck home doing nothing half the time, it gave people more time to think about themselves, and sometimes those thoughts weren't always positive. Being locked inside caused a lot of stress and emotional exhaustion, which impacted mental health. In order to cope with these struggles, teenagers often use dance as a way to ease anxiety and improve their mood. Dance was used to create a confidence booster and can allow many people to express themselves. It can build self-esteem and communication skills. Many teens sometimes record their dance journey from when they first started to present to show their improvement, and those results improved emotionally and physically. Now, to all you teens out there, I know you at least been hit once with the, "You're just a kid, what would you know?" But when it's time to take care of a sibling or do a heavy task, that's when parents start saying, "You're not a baby anymore, act your age. It's time to grow up." Talk about contradictions. They only want us to act our age when it's in their best interest. But as soon as we voice our beliefs and it goes against them, that's when they tell us to know our place as children, and we're not grown enough to understand the world yet. As parents, you should take time to speak to your children and ask them about their worries and problems, because though it may seem as if they're okay, they can be suffering alone in silence. Don't belittle their ideas just because you think it's immature. Try to see things from their perspective and understand why it is they do the things we do. There is no such thing as bad children or disappointing children. They're just kids who need a little more guidance. To them, it may seem as if we don't have problems, but we are facing our own inner demons, because at the end of the day, we're all still human. I hope you were able to learn more about the insight of teenage mind from this TED Talk.
Hello, my name is Susanna Pollack, and I'm the president of Games for Change, a not-for-profit which advocates for the use of video games to drive social impact. In a normal time, a month in which employers added 661,000 jobs, the October 2020 number, this would represent an absolute blockbuster. These, of course, are not normal times. And the 661,000 positions added are paltry relative to the 22 million positions slashed in March and April, and relative to the 7-figure monthly job decline experienced from May through August. If the rate of job creation outlined by the Labor Department holds steady, it would take another 17 months for the economy to be back to its pre-pandemic levels of employment. It's that job market that confronts today's youth. Now, a young man from Brooklyn, Cruz Grullon, who has seen his community struggle with chronic unemployment, thinks that the answer lies not just in job creation, but in building the capacity of young people to persist in searching, finding, and cultivating opportunity. His talk today challenges the traditional notion that high school graduates should focus on academic outcomes as a key to their next step in their journey, but calls on education reformers to expand their definition of core skills to include the ability to understand what their strengths are, how to find opportunities, and how to be empowered to chart their own path.
In 2018, a study conducted by Burning Glass Technologies and Strata Education Network, it was discovered that on average, approximately 43% of college graduates who obtain a bachelor's degree suffered from unemployment soon after graduating. While this data of unemployment does vary with the field the bachelor's degree is in, the problem does not lie with the competitive nature of that field, but rather the mindset the graduate has when entering the workforce for the first time. What these graduates who used to be students like me and my peers need are growth mindsets. Being hardworking, determined, taking risks, and knowing that you are in control are all traits that are aligned with a growth mindset. But just knowing what a growth mindset is not enough to help students to allow them to succeed in the harsh and cruel society we live in. I have a question for everyone watching at home. Now that you have a rough idea of what a growth mindset is, can you name the ways that your school has prepared you with a growth mindset for the problems that we face in the real world? I bet you can't. So how do we expect the future generation to form an answer as well? The reason why not everyone knows how to put a growth mindset into use is because of the flawed system schools run by. Schools are not helping students form a growth mindset that will help them be successful in society. Rather, schools completely overlook growth mindsets, or they briefly teach the students about them, telling the students that with a growth mindset, they can be successful in any aspect. While this statement is not entirely incorrect, just talking about a growth mindset is not enough information to instill a functioning one in them. You may ask, what's the importance of this and why is this a problem? Before we get into the evaluation of why this is a problem and its importance, let's reiterate with more detail what a growth mindset is. The concept of a growth mindset was first introduced by American psychologist Carol Dweck. She is the Lewis and Virginia Eaton Professor of Psychology at Stanford University and the author of Mindset, The New Psychology of Success. Dr. Dweck defines a growth mindset as when individuals believe their talents can be developed and through hard work, effort, good strategies, and input from others makes them stronger. This is important because growth mindsets will allow students to succeed in anything they do in the future. Without a growth mindset, one might face a problem, fail, and give up, or even be afraid to take risks, which, be honest, we're all guilty of doing once in our life. But with a growth mindset, you won't be afraid of taking risk and failing because you know that you could use this failure to take a different approach and advance further than you initially were. Now that we have a specific problem, let's get into how we can solve it. One possible solution to this problem is instructing teachers to teach students about growth mindsets in their classes and demonstrate through examples how to implement them in any environment so that the students are prepared to use their school-developed growth mindsets in society. While this is a simple and quick solution, not all schools have the leisure to include lessons of growth mindsets into their core classes, as some of them are focused on certain exams such as Regents or AP exams. This is why I propose that we add Foundations of Leadership to their curriculum. What is Foundational Leadership, or FOL, you ask? Like the name implies, it is a class offered here at BrooklynLab, in which students are given both tools and taught the traits that make leaders and are taught how to implement them in society to make them leaders. An example of one trait that makes up a leader is a growth mindset. Great leaders all have one of these, and they are great because they can use their growth mindset to tackle problems they are faced with. In Foundational Leadership, teachers can provide students with examples of leaders in society and how they got into the position in order for the students to see how a growth mindset will help someone be successful. Then, the teacher will put students through scenarios that mimic society and the events that they may face. The scenario would have to be made to fail the students. While this may confuse a lot of people, they may say something along the lines of, why would you give something to the students you know they cannot handle, or why are you setting them up for failure? For those with a growth mindset, failure becomes the basis for future success. In the Foundational Leadership class, students will be given the opportunity to fail, try something difficult, and fail miserably. The measure of success will not be whether they've mastered the content or applied some specific set of skills, but whether they could use their creativity and growth mindsets to problem solve and to find a solution to help them through their failures. An example of a project that students would do in this class is they're running a community service project to help provide for the needy and make the community safer. But then abruptly, the group budget gets cut. The students at first will not have a solution to this problem and will feel stuck and hopeless. But with a growth mindset, students will realize just because their initial path has been blocked off, it does not mean they cannot take another path. For example, then students could either start a fundraiser or raise awareness for what they are doing in the community to gain donations as a solution to their budget being cut. This is just one of the many ways that foundations and leadership teachers can provide their students with lessons on how a growth mindset can help them succeed. Another way that schools can help provide students with growth mindsets is through internships and giving students positions of power in school that affect others. These positions and jobs will give students responsibility and also provide them with a space in which they'll be able to learn essential skills on how their actions impact others. In these jobs and positions, students might have the tendency to fail or meet a certain standard, whether that is because of ignorance or lack of experience. This risk schools take with the students provides the opportunity to push them to be more successful when tackling unique challenges. By giving students internships and jobs, this will allow students to get first-hand experience in the workforce. With the experience, students will have developed their own growth mindsets and might even further them than just learning about one in class. This is a result of the everyday challenges that people in the workforce face frequently, forcing students to come up with solutions to these unique problems they have not faced before. This growth mindset that the students will develop through foundations of leadership and the experience they receive through their internships will help students with getting a job. Students need experience and a strong growth mindset to be successful in the job market now more than ever. With the COVID-19 pandemic, jobs are becoming harder and harder to find. In April, the unemployment rate was as high as 14.7%. This is just an example of how difficult getting a job has become as a result of the pandemic. Allowing students to receive internships soon after they develop a somewhat growth mindset will enable them to put theory into practice by providing them with useful experiences that will boost in personal and social effectiveness. In a journal written by Nick Ellis, a professor of marketing management at Durham University, titled Developing Graduate Sales Professionals Through Cooperative Education and Work Placements, a Relationship Marketing Approach, recorded that students reported an enhancement in their personal skills from participating, such as time management, verbal communication, and self-confidence. All these personal skills are things that employers look for and will help students be successful in the job market, even with COVID-19. My suggestion is that schools add foundations of leadership as a class, and schools should take more risk with students by providing them with internships and positions of power that affect others. This will boost student and graduate success in all aspects by reinforcing their skills as a leader through a strong growth mindset, making it crucial for students who plan to enter the workforce to have developed one that will allow them to adapt and solve unique problems they will face in the harsh society of today. While this change to the school systems may seem difficult, it is a necessary one. To prepare students for the harshness of society and for them to have the confidence that they can succeed because of the growth mindset they have is what I hope to see in the near future. Thank you.
Hey, my name is Devin Young, co-founder and president at Classcraft. Up next, we have a performance by poet, spoken word and recording artist, songwriter and author, 3 times HBO Deaf Poet, Gold Clio Award winner, NAACP Image Award winner, and contributor to a Grammy Award-winning album, Jay Ivy, with a song from his latest and 4th album, which is also being considered for a Grammy this year, called Catching Dreams. Please enjoy Jay Ivy's Change the World, featuring Tere, and Ya.
Good morning. Good morning. To you and yours.
We're here to change the world. We're still here with so much more to give. We're here to change the world. We're still here with so much more to give.
With tears of joy in my eyes, I picked up the pen. How do I begin to tell you how deep I feel this love? Wish I could get a whole world a hug. Tears falling on the page, cause I love y'all, all y'all. I see our potential, our purpose, our worth is measured by what we do for others. Our sisters, our brothers, we're all one, we're connected. Our bond is electric like lightning dancing on concrete. We We've been jolted out of our sleep. Our spirits have awakened, strengthened by all that's been taken. God ain't give us nothing we can't handle. Those egos go get handled. The greed dismantled. The fear that feeds the hate will be canceled. The love will be ample, endless. The energy we feeling is just a sample, cause we have so much more to give to this world.
We're here to change the world.
We're here.
So much more to give. We're here to change the world.
We're here.
We're still here. With so much love to give.
We're only here for a blink of an eye. While I'm here, I want to sink to the sky. Soar with more to give, build, yield, live, without just going through the motions. Time is golden, time to refocus. My hope is deep in a dream that a king once had. I'm fighting off every nightmare demon that litters my path, knowing that the only time I'm helpless is when I don't ask for help. Our wealth is our connection. Those folks over there ain't strangers, they're beautiful reflections. For far too long, we neglected the essence of who we truly are. With light, with stars, we had to fight for what's ours. Recharge our energy, readjust our frequency. I'm dialed in, the road to victory is long, but we're miles in. We just have to lead with love, and no matter what, keep smiling.
We're here to change the world.
Keep smiling. Still here.
So much more to give. We're here to change the world.
We're here to change the world.
Still here. With so much love to give. Superhero. The presidential. With the best jokes. Sentimental. Make you go.
We're here to change the world. Not foreign objects. Our souls are artifacts. We all offer something to the overall context. It's never been a contest. So let's carry on traditions tied to remissions with visions. I'm jumping out the window of my box. I'm flying, I'm grounded, I'm living. The alarm has sounded, wake up, stay woke. They wrote the narrative as our hearts smoke. Stay away from the dark notes, dark times. Spark minds, entice minds. To find time to look inside, so we can change the world. So we can change the world.
To change it, we're here to change the world.
Let's change the world.
To change it, we're here to change the world.
Can change the world.
To change it, we're here to change the world.
Let's change the world.
To change it.
My name is Michael Preston. I'm the Executive Director of the Joan Gans Cooney Center, a research and innovation lab focused on children's learning in the digital age, named after the visionary founder of Sesame Street. Do you remember that classic book, The Giving Tree by Shel Silverstein? It tells the story of a tree and a boy who throughout his childhood form an indelible bond. The tree is a metaphor for perfect altruism. The man is a metaphor for perfect selfishness. The book also begs the question, when was the last time you interacted with a tree? Maybe you enjoyed its shade on an unseasonably warm October afternoon, or studied its changing leaf colors, or thought of maple trees as you enjoyed a pancake breakfast. Our next speaker, high school senior Paul Malefyt, asks us to understand the complex history and ecosystem of trees. Paul offers a wise perspective on the power of both a single tree and a forest to shape and change our ecosystem. It's a special call for the protection of our forests by using their unique powers to safeguard them in the face of scorching wildfires and the effects of climate change. And with that, I give you the magnificent Mr. Malefyt.
As children, we read in fairy tales of enchanted forests filled with trees that have human faces, trees that can talk, and, on occasion, walk. I'm here today to tell you that while most of us have dismissed these stories as mere fantasy, they do contain within them a hidden wisdom. A wisdom that, if embraced, could help shatter the illusion of forests as inert, inanimate thickets, and return to us the image of the ethereal woodland, an image that, despite its veracity, seems to be worn away by the cynicism of adulthood. Over the course of this speech, I will delve into the marvelous world of trees by exploring where they come from, how they thrive, and how they are threatened by modern humans. By the end of this discussion, I hope that the trees of the world are as lively and animated to you as they now are to me. With this viewpoint in mind, we might be able to better understand the problems modern forests are facing, problems like deforestation, climate change, and forest fires, and most importantly, how humans can help. And on that note, I shall begin from that which all forests begin, soil. While it may not seem like much, the soil that lines the floors of old-growth forests is an unimaginably complex product of many years worth of biological decomposition and erosion, through which plant matter is slowly degraded by microorganisms until it is converted into the highly fertile, nutrient-dense substrate known as humus. This is the kind of soil that we see scattered about forests today. And in healthy forests, the humus becomes deeper and richer over time, so that growing conditions for trees constantly improve. Besides the soil itself, there also exist marvelous organisms that live within the soil. To be frank, these organisms, with their small size and nearly unpronounceable Latin names, are not all that attractive. It is quite clear that mountain pine beetles, millipedes, and pseudocentipedes are not nearly as engaging to the public as dolphins, kangaroos, or panda bears. But these small organisms make up for in their size with their indispensable position in the food chain. They break down organic matter, turning unyielding plant fibers into soft, nutrient-dense humus, making them so valuable to the continuation of forest ecosystems that it would not be an exaggeration to call them the terrestrial equivalent of plankton. On the topic of indispensable organisms, there exists a branch of life form that one could call biological fence-sitters, and that can either be considered animals or plants. The entities that I'm referring to are known as fungi. Although fungi can't photosynthesize food for themselves and rely on organic connections they form with other living beings to survive and reproduce, they are still immensely important to forest ecosystems. Now, so far, I've discussed humus, microorganisms, and now fungi. Finally, we're ready for the trees. Over millions of years, they've evolved their root structures to be as efficient as possible when it comes to absorbing moisture from the soil. Different tree species have their own specialized structural adaptations that allow them to proliferate in their own ecological niches, with each generation getting closer and closer to the limits of efficiency and parsimony. As a result of this evolutionary inclination, thousands of independently evolving tree species from all over the world have come to pair up with fungi. To be clear, the relationship between plants and fungi is not always a symbiotic one. There are cases of fungi expanding their underground cottony of organic connections, known as mycelium, to destroy and consume entire forests. On the other end of the spectrum, there exist examples of amicable relationships between fungi and trees, such as the oak milkcat mushroom combination. This relationship is initiated when the fungus bores its threads directly into the fine hairs that line the oak's root system. With their combined biomass, the oak is able to absorb water and nutrients from a much larger surface area than it would have been able to otherwise, allowing it to contain twice the amount of life-giving nitrogen and phosphorus than plants that tap the soil with their roots alone. The bonding process is highly unique to the tree and fungal species in question, which is why each species of tree has a distinctive fungal species that it pairs up with. Fungal root systems can span multiple trees and many different species of fungus, facilitating the exchange of nutrients and information between different plant species, which has been colloquially called the wood wide web. Perhaps one of the most intriguing phenomena that occur across this web is the seemingly altruistic tendency for trees to share nutrients and support their neighbors when threats are detected. For example, during one of his excursions, German forester Peter Willeben came upon the stump of an old beech tree that had been cut down hundreds of years before. To his surprise, when he peeled back the layer of bark that covered the stump, he discovered a layer of bright green chlorophyll beneath, showing that the tree was still alive, despite having no leaves to photosynthesize with. Upon further study, he realized that trees frequently exchange glucose, water, and other vital compounds between one another in order to contribute to the collective survival of the forest ecosystem. Trees also use this wood wide web to exchange information on encroaching threats, one such threat being the common bark beetle. With these beetles, when these beetles find young or ailing trees, they use their specialized mandibles to burrow directly into the tree bark until they reach the nutrient-dense cambium at the center of the tree. There they will lay their eggs, from which voracious larvae will emerge, spelling doom from the tree as they devour it from the inside out. To avoid this fate, when a tree detects the presence of bark beetles on its trunk, it will send out electrochemical signals to the surrounding tree roots and fungi, requesting aid from neighboring trees for water and glucose, which it will use to flood its trunk with tree sap, produce more phytonicides, and regenerate any holes left in its bark. It might be surprising to learn that trees work so hard to defend one another in this way, considering the fact that much of humanity's modern understanding of trees is built around the idea that trees will fight and compete for light and space. But this is a gross misunderstanding of how forests function. Trees do compete, but rarely to the point where they will pose a significant threat to one another. Forests are self-perpetuating systems. They maintain a stable internal microclimate, produce nutrient-dense humus, and capture particles in the air. This system only works if a large number of healthy trees are working together, living in close proximity, keeping the precious humus layer on the forest floor cool and moist. When the system is broken, like when large numbers of trees are killed off, the forest ecosystem fails. All of this information is meant to illustrate how complex forest ecosystems are, and how humans have historically been either willfully or genuinely unaware of their impact on the environment. This statement becomes especially relevant today, where there currently exists a massive wildfire burning across the West, which has collectively scorched an area equivalent to the size of Connecticut and is still burning. In order to stop this fire and prevent future fires, it is important to understand how this fire started and why it still continues to burn with such intensity. The obvious culprit is climate change, which has dried out wooded regions and made them more flammable. But there are other lesser-known factors that also contribute to intense forest fires, such as how humans quickly put out minor forest fires as soon as they spring up. These misguided efforts ignore that small forest fires are needed to burn away brush and kindling that collects on the forest floor. These fires are minor and very common, so much so that some tree species have evolved methods of using these fires to their advantage. Jack pines are one such species. As they have evolved, they've developed cones that, when exposed to high heat, pop open, dispersing seeds onto a bed of nutrient-dense ash, cleared of vegetation. Humans put out minor forest fires as soon as they spring up, leading to a situation where massive amounts of flammable material has accumulated on the forest floor. When this situation is paired with high heat caused by climate change, forests that would have at one point survived or even thrived in the face of fire are now threatened by its destructive force. With this in mind, the Healing Harvest Forest Foundation non-for-profit made it their goal to break down the capitalistic relationship Americans have with their forests and promote community-based forestry initiatives that advocate for the removal of single ailing trees as opposed to the commercial clear-cutting of entire forests. This allows us to obtain lumber while still preserving the health of forest ecosystems. So perhaps next time you are gazing upon the trunk of a sturdy oak or hiking beneath the crown of an old beech, you will stop and think about the vast complexity that exists right beneath your feet, a complexity that we risk losing if we aren't cognizant of our impact on the environment. So let us pay more attention to what the trees of the world have to offer. While we might not see the expressions in their cracked bark, hear the conversations unfold across their gossipy roots, or witness their harrowing journeys from seed to verdant tower. If I had to leave you with one message, it would be that the trees of the world are just as lively as we are, and should be treated with the same care and humanity that we reserve for each other.
"2020 marked a seminal shift for Black Lives Matter. It went from a social media tag and a loose umbrella of groups to a global movement. And yet, critics of this global movement to end police violence against Black Americans have mischaracterized it in the mainstream media as violent, and Black victims of police brutality as criminals or dangerous. Pundits and hosts on one of the most popular news channels in America have described the movement as a hate group and a movement that promotes the execution of police officers. But this isn't a new tactic for opponents of nonviolent civil rights movements. 4 decades ago, detractors tried the same type of argument against Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. While many now know of the March on Washington in 1963 as a peaceful event in which King gave his renowned "I Have a Dream" speech, the Kennedy administration at the time expected the absolute worst. The federal government essentially mobilized all its resources to prepare for the worst, deploying troops, beefing up security, ramping up surveillance, and clearing jails for new arrests. The mission even went by a code name, Operation Washington. The military buildup was so heavy that one reporter observed that the city was transformed from the capital of the nation at peace to a nation at war. Our final speaker of the night, 11th grader Jazmine Holloway, not only rejects this modern-day mischaracterization of the Black Lives Matter movement, but she compels us to ask questions about how the media's handling of Black Lives Matter movement and its victims echoes deeply with the bigotry of the past. She shares her analysis of how the media has unfairly reported on past protest movements, many of which are now cited as large-scale social change catalysts in our communities. Jazmine urges us to reconsider our view of American history and remember our duty to raise our voice to demand truthful narratives going forward.
Hashtag Black Lives Matter has been the most used hashtag of 2020. But why? Is that only because it's trendy, a cool movement to say that you're a part of, or is it a way to bring awareness to those who have been oppressed for centuries? I would say that in the eyes of some, this is something that they genuinely believe in, while others just say it because they fear the judgment and the ridicule of the African American community. As of now, 804 African Americans have been killed by police, and that's just this year alone. This includes men, women, and children. The media often uses words such as thugs, criminals, and dangers to describe the deceased. But explain this. When the stories focus on a white individual tragically gunned down by police, why aren't they labeled using such terms? Many people are realizing that African Americans have been notably framed in history and in their everyday lives as inferior and a danger to society. However, no one would look at a white man, woman, or child with the same set of prejudices. But this isn't just a modern-day issue. This way of thinking has been embedded in the history of America, hell, in the history of the world ever since the time of the Atlantic slave trade. Ever since the 17th century, people have been categorizing people of color as barbaric and as animalistic. But who are the real monsters in this case? The people who torn families apart to profit off of the enslavement and subjugation of human beings? Or was it the millions of African Americans who were brought to this nation to carry this country on their back for centuries to come? In my day and age, the media takes part in how everything is conveyed to the public, and the world itself, as it has such a large role on how people think. African American history has been put under a broad spectrum as people define Black history as the people who led large movements, like Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, Harriet Tubman, and many others. The accomplishments of these people are celebrated today. Yes, great things, but back then, they were outrageous, controversial, and despised. The civil rights movement responded to an accumulation of violence and injustice against people of color, and as a result, the ones you now know of today as heroes, publicly I may add, are set on pedestals for breaking down those color barriers. African Americans in the 16th century were chained together by their captors because of a long-term fear that one day they would uprise against them and finally get what they deserve. For years, Black people have been protesting in many forms, and it took nonviolent protests, riots, looting, burning buildings, and dead bodies dropping for us to even be recognized as a force to be reckoned with. But why does it take people causing chaos for change to happen? From the past to the present, the narration of Black history and Black people has been written with a biased eye. For example, the Black Lives Matter movement has been going on for years, but it hasn't been recognized. But for me, it began July 2013 after the death of 17-year-old Trayvon Martin after he was shot down by a neighborhood watch member who assumed that he was a danger to him just 5 months earlier. But for my older listeners, your Black Lives Matter movement may have been the Black Panthers, Little Rock 9, or even the NAACP. Although these organizations accomplish many things, Black people are still fighting till this day. It's unfortunate that after everything, all the protests, the violent and nonviolent protests, we are still fighting to even earn the truth and our respect in a world where we've earned it. African Americans have been protesting for things that other Americans receive as a right. It took violence, death, endless protests, and unfulfilled negotiations for African Americans to still be alienated in a nation that my ancestors fought so hard to build up to where it is today. To understand the present moment of collective action against racism, it is important to investigate the framing of white history too. Some of you out there may have never been discriminated against or had anyone judge you because of your skin color. Most people who fall under this privilege are not people of color. Isn't that odd? This is because the way you live your life today is the product of the actions of the people who came before you, your parents, your grandparents, and even your great-grandparents. But even till this day, the way the world sees you is influenced by the way history was narrated. So with that, I would like to acknowledge this section of my talk, Framing White America. From the American Revolution to the KKK, and now even the recent protests on who our next leader will be, what do all of these events have in common? The people involved in these events are predominantly white individuals. In the 1760s and even long before that, when the Americans living here in what was then known as the 13 colonies began their rebellion against their established ruler at the time, the people were called rebels. A rebel is a person who rises in opposition or armed resistance against an established government or ruler. And people like Nathaniel Bacon, George Washington, and many others were glorified for fighting their oppressors. Funny how, when Nat Turner formed the slave rebellion, he was called criminal. The media, politics, and even the American citizens put the American revolutionaries in the highest form of glory, while leaving the unsung heroes in the lowest form of inferiority. In 1864, a U.S. hate group known as the Ku Klux Klan was a white supremacist organization that was created to employ terror in the pursuit of white supremacist ideology. The KKK is responsible for the killing of thousands of African American people. Years later, the Ku Klux Klan remained, and with that came more deaths, more hysteria in society, as this was a way of protesting that African Americans weren't wanted in America if they weren't under the enslavement of a white individual. Now, in 2020, there are groups like the Proud Boys that the government consistently turns away from. In the 1950s up until the 1980s, the government created a covert, and may I add, illegal project conducted by the FBI in order to infiltrate and undermine civil rights organizations like the Black Panthers and many others. These forms of protest arise out of the unadulterated fear and hatred that African Americans might actually get what they deserved. African Americans endured utter dehumanization, fought for what they believed in, and won, and they were called criminals, while white supremacists get away with murder and more hysteria in the world and are glorified by many and were called heroes. Now, some of you may think, why should I listen to this girl when all she did was talk about history? As a person who identifies and is identified as African American, I have had to sit down in classrooms and listen to the same narratives of what is African American history and hear the generations before me be portrayed as miscreants, villainous, and inferior to the rest of society. Although these labels have been used in the past, the civil rights movement never ended. It took a long way to pause, and even so, the portrayal of African Americans as radicals of history is still heavily used today, with the media and politics and in the mindsets of majority of the residents in America, in order to delegitimize the movement and to cement the white dominance of the status quo. Many people have used this tactic to delegitimize the BLM protest by denouncing the protest's violent aspect, but doing so only papers over the history of anti-Black violence that ignited the protest in the first place. By ignoring our history as Americans, you'll be disregarding the legacies of the African Americans who carried this country and who are still alive honorably doing so today. We should not have to fear being shot by the police as much as we shouldn't have to struggle to get the deserved job promotion. Angela Davis once said, "I am no longer accepting the things I cannot change. I am changing the things that I cannot accept." With that, I say Americans claim to be unified, but to what extent will you go to change the systemic oppression against African Americans that has been engraved in the land that you proudly call your country?
Wow, those were ideas worth spreading and sharing. I just want to share my admiration for the speaker's hard work, vulnerability, dedication, and commitment to preparing their talks for us. It's not easy to not only find your voice, but feel the power to raise it. I know I speak for all of our viewers when I say thank you to our speakers and performers. We're not done yet. We're going to end this night with a challenge for all of our viewers. I challenge you to listen. Listen to a new perspective, a new voice, and members of your community you never met before. Change the channel you traditionally watch to something different. Read a newspaper or website. Push yourself to change your perspective. Hey, even go talk to a tree. Search for unique approaches to unique challenges. Explore how you can be a champion of a growth mindset, not only in yourself, but others. And consider how you can work with others to achieve social change. Thank you for joining me for Brooklyn Laboratory Charter School's inaugural TEDxYouth at Brooklyn Lab. Good night.